In the late 1st century AD, the Roman Empire stretched from the blistering deserts of Syria to the green fields of Gaul. It was an empire that believed itself to be the entirety of the civilized world. But there was one place at the very edge of their maps that refused to be tamed, a wild, misty, and defiant island they called Britannia. For decades, Rome had struggled to subdue this land. Legions had fought and bled for every inch of ground, facing ferocious Celtic tribes who valued freedom more than life itself. The conquest was a bloody, expensive, and seemingly endless stalemate. Then, in 77 AD, a new governor arrived, Gnaeus Julius Agricola. He was not just a general, he was a master strategist, a ruthless administrator, and a man who understood that, to conquer Britannia, he needed to break not just its armies, but its very soul. Agricola's approach was a brutal, but effective combination of military force and psychological warfare. He knew that simply winning battles was not enough. He had to erase the Britons' will to resist. His campaigns pushed the Roman war machine further north than ever before, into the misty, untamed highlands of Caledonia, modern-day Scotland. His strategy was methodical and terrifying. Each summer, his legions would march into hostile territory. They didn't just seek out the enemy armies. They systematically destroyed the native hillforts, burned the crops in the fields, and slaughtered the livestock. This was not just warfare, it was vastatio, a deliberate policy of creating a desert to crush the enemy's ability to survive. He understood the power of infrastructure. Behind his advancing legions came the engineers. For every mile they conquered, they built a fort. For every fort, they built a road connecting it back to the heart of Roman power. These were not just supply lines, they were scars on the landscape, permanent symbols of Roman dominance, a grid of control stamped onto the wild earth. The native tribes, led by chieftains like Calgacus, were faced with an impossible choice: submit and become slaves in their own land, or fight and watch their world be annihilated. They were not fighting a mere army, they were fighting a system, a relentless, grinding machine of conquest that turned forests into fortresses and fields into wastelands. Agricola was not just conquering a province, he was engineering a cultural extinction. He was the architect of Rome's final brutal solution to the problem of Britain. The stage was being set for a final, cataclysmic battle that would decide the fate of the island at the edge of the world. Agricola's relentless campaign had pushed the tribes of Caledonia to the breaking point. Their lands were burned, their people scattered, cornered at the edge of the world. They understood that this was their final stand. Under the leadership of a chieftain named Calgacus, the clans united, mustering a force of over 30,000 warriors, a last, desperate alliance against the invaders. As the disciplined ranks of Agricola's legions approached, Calgacus delivered one of the most powerful speeches in ancient history, a blistering condemnation of Roman imperialism, recorded for all time by the historian Tacitus. He stood before his people and spoke of the enemy, robbers of the world, he called them. Their ambition is not satisfied by lands to the east or west. They are unique in being driven by the same greed for poverty and for wealth, to robbery, to slaughter, to plunder. They give the lying name of empire, and where they make a desert, they call it peace. He spoke of what they were fighting for. There are no lands beyond us, nothing but waves and rocks. And the Romans, more deadly still. You cannot escape their arrogance by submission. They have plundered the world. Will you, who are unconquered, who were born for freedom, be broken now? This was the clash of two worlds. On one side, the Caledonian horde, a ferocious mass of warriors, fighting with wild courage for their homes, their families, and their freedom. On the other, the legions of Rome, a disciplined, heavily armored, and professional killing machine, fighting for the glory and greed of an empire. The battle, fought at a place called Mons Graupius, began with a terrifying charge. Caledonian chariots thundered across the field, trying to break the Roman lines, their drivers hurling javelins before joining the fray on foot. The air was filled with the sounds of war horns, the clash of steel, and the screams of the dying. But Agricola was a master tactician. He held his valuable legions in reserve, using his auxiliary cohort soldiers from other conquered tribes to absorb the initial, frenzied assault. He ordered his Batavian and Tungrian infantry to engage in brutal, close-quarters combat, their short, stabbing swords brutally effective against the long slashing blades of the Celts. The fighting was savage, a chaotic melee in the mud and rain. The passion and fury of the Caledonians met the cold, disciplined brutality of the Roman army. The initial charge was blunted, but the sheer number of tribesmen pressed the Roman lines. The battle hung in the balance, a bloody stalemate where the fate of Britannia would be decided. The Battle of Mons Graupius raged, a bloody stalemate in the Scottish mud. The Caledonian warriors, fighting with the ferocity of cornered animals, had thrown everything they had at the Roman auxiliary line. But Agricola, the master butcher, had held his nerve, and his sharpest blades the legions had yet to be unsheathed. Now, he saw his moment. As the Caledonian charge lost its momentum and their formation began to falter, Agricola gave the signal. The Roman cavalry, which had been held on the flanks, thundered into motion. They didn't charge the front, but instead swung wide, smashing into the rear of the Caledonian army. The effect was instantaneous and devastating. The tribesmen, now attacked from both the front and the back, were thrown into complete panic. Their loose formation dissolved into a terrified mob. The battle was no longer a contest, it was a slaughter. Agricola finally unleashed his legions. Fresh, disciplined, and relentless, they advanced in perfect order, a wall of shields and stabbing swords. They moved forward methodically, not with the passion of the Celts, but with the cold, mechanical efficiency of a reaping machine. The Caledonians, trapped and surrounded, were cut down by the thousands. Tacitus describes a scene of horrific carnage. The fields ran red with blood, men fled into the forests, but the Roman cavalry pursued them, hunting them down like animals. In their despair, some Caledonian men were said to have killed their own wives and children to prevent them from being captured and enslaved by the Romans, before taking their own lives. By the end of the day, the field was silent, save for the cries of the wounded. 10,000 Caledonians lay dead. Roman losses, according to Tacitus, were less than 400. It was a victory of almost unbelievable totality, a testament to the brutal superiority of the Roman military machine. Agricola had won his ultimate victory. He had broken the last great tribal army in Britannia. The next day, the true scale of the peace he had created was revealed. A vast, eerie silence had fallen over the highlands. The smoke from burning villages and funeral pyres mingled with the morning mist. The survivors of the battle had vanished into the wilderness, their society shattered, their will to fight as a unified force destroyed. The butcher had finished his work. He had made a desert of the Caledonian resistance and called it a Roman victory. Britannia, it seemed, was finally conquered. The slaughter at Mons Graupius was the bloody climax of Agricola's conquest. He had done what no Roman general before him had managed. He had pacified Britannia, from its southern shores to the very edge of the Scottish Highlands. He even sent a fleet to circumnavigate the island, proving for the first time that it was, in fact, an island. His victory was total. But in the paranoid world of the Roman Empire, total victory could be more dangerous than defeat. Back in Rome, the emperor was Domitian, a ruler known for his insecurity and jealousy. As news of Agricola's stunning successes reached the capital, Domitian's praise grew fainter, and his suspicion grew stronger. Agricola was a hero, the people loved him, the army respected him. For a paranoid emperor like Domitian, this made Agricola a threat. A victorious general with a loyal army at his back was the stuff of nightmares for any emperor. A potential rival for the throne. In 85 AD, just as he was consolidating his control over the newly conquered territories, Agricola was abruptly recalled. To Rome, he was granted the honors of a triumph, but it was a hollow victory. He was not given another military command. The man who had conquered Britain was effectively forced into a quiet, powerless retirement. The bitter irony was that Rome never fully capitalized on his conquest. After Agricola's departure, the legions in northern Britain were gradually withdrawn. The forts he built were abandoned. The hard-won territory in Caledonia was allowed to slip back into the hands of the unconquered tribes. The famous Hadrian's Wall, built decades later, would be a tacit admission of failure, defensive barrier marking the limit of Roman ambition, far south of where Agricola's victories had reached. Why was his work abandoned? Perhaps it was too expensive to maintain control over the rugged highlands, but it is more likely that Emperor Domitian, out of jealousy and fear, deliberately starved the new province of resources, ensuring that no other general could gain the same glory that Agricola had. Agricola, the butcher of Britannia, died in 93 AD in quiet obscurity. Rumors swirled that he had been poisoned on Domitian's orders, though this was never proven. His fate was a chilling lesson in Roman politics. The same ruthlessness he had shown to the Britons was, in a different form, turned against him by his own emperor. His legacy is a paradox. He was a brutal conqueror who employed tactics of terror and systematic destruction. He was also a brilliant general and an effective administrator whose story was immortalized by his son-in-law, the historian Tacitus. His conquest was both a stunning military achievement and, ultimately, a strategic dead end for the empire. He conquered a land that Rome could not, or would not, hold. He was a butcher who served an ungrateful master, a victor who paid the price for his own glory.
We have witnessed the brutal cost of empire, the silencing of a land, but the desire for freedom, once ignited, is hard to extinguish from the fields of conquered lands. A new cry for liberty will soon echo across the Roman world. He was a Thracian gladiator, a slave with nothing to lose but his chains. He ignited a spark of rebellion that grew into a raging fire, threatening to consume the heart of Rome itself. For 2 years, he led an army of escaped slaves, defying the legions and challenging the mightiest empire the world had ever known. Next time, witness the true story of the slave who dared to defy an empire. The legend of Spartacus begins.